We have assembled here today for our third Choral Contemplation event, which I'm glad to say now includes an external speaker. This is happening after a period of almost 14 months, and therefore it is my pleasure to welcome Shaunaka Rishi, a friend of our college, director of Oxford Center for Hindu Studies, and quite importantly, the Hindu chaplain for the entire university. Today's event is part of a new initiative where I'd be inviting one faith-specific chaplain each term to speak about their religion, belief, or faith in the context of the broader theme of the term. As our viewers would know, our theme for this term is communities. And one of the great things about the history of beliefs stemming from the Indian subcontinent, especially the ancient ones, is that the simplicity and the beauty with which it helps us navigate very complex and contentious issues of our times makes it worthy of our time to listen to it over and over again. Thus, I cannot think of a better speaker to elaborate on the idea of pluralistic societies than Shaunaka. Note, our term card stated that we'd focus on minorities, but upon reflection, I realized that it might be helpful to broaden the scope of the topic of today's event and discuss the idea of pluralities within our community. Now, in order to assist Shaunaka in preparing his remarks, I provided him with some thoughts and questions, which I would appreciate if he could elaborate upon, leaving the final decision of the questions he chooses to answer on him. Now, I must move along and make way for our college's wonderful choir, opening with Edward Elgar's As Torrents in the Summer, followed by The Snow, It Melts the Soonest, which is a British folk dating back to 1821, but you'll hear a version arranged by our very own Will Dawes.
I will be reading two extracts from The Unknown Indians, a 2016 work by Subhdra Sengupta. Firstly, on the importance of challenge and difference in our communities. The Nobel laureate and economist Amartya Sen calls us argumentative Indians, and that we are, and proudly so. We love to question and debate, protest and criticize, and for any civilization, that is a very good thing. In ancient India, many towns had an assembly hall where the curious would gather and scholars and philosophers would meet to debate on issues. Even the Buddha went and defended his teachings at these halls. We have always had space for differing beliefs. Among the many schools of thought were the Nastikas, or atheists, who do not believe in the existence of God. When the Mughal Emperor Akbar invited religious leaders and philosophers for discussions at Fatehpur Sikri, sitting beside the mullahs and pandits were Nastikas. You can be sure the discussion got heated, and Akbar enjoyed himself thoroughly. As an enlightened king, he knew that blind obedience is never good for a civilization, because when people stop thinking, it kills progress. Secondly, and to finish, an important lesson on the role of change in our communities. Being open to change, asking questions, being rebellious, being creative. That is how a civilization grows and becomes like a huge banyan tree, giving shelter and shade to many people of many regions, languages, religions, and genders.
few extracts from a 2014 paper, Equality as a Social Principle Described in Vedic Tradition by Priyanka Pandey. In ancient India, there were 4 varnas or classes: Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. The basic idea was division of labor in the society. People who preached spiritual teachings to the society and lived spiritual lives were called Brahmins. Kshatriya were the people who protected the society against external attacks and maintained internal order. Vaishya were businessmen, traders, and farmers. Shudra were the people engaged in services and included carpenters, blacksmiths, goldsmiths, cobbler, porters, etc. Now, in the beginning, there was only one varna. We were all Brahmins and all Shudras, says the Upanishads and the Mahabharata, both of which are key texts in Hinduism. A Smriti text says that one is born a Shudra and through purification he becomes a Brahmin. According to Bhagavad Gita, Varna is conferred on the basis of the intrinsic nature of an individual, which is a combination of 3 gunas or qualities. Sattva, the quality of balance; Rajas, the quality of passion or activity; and Tamas, the quality of dullness or inactivity. Now, Mahabharata defines a Brahmin as one who is truthful, forgiving, and kind. It clearly points out that a Brahmin is not a Brahmin just because he is born one, nor is a Shudra because his parents are one. Another scripture, Dharma Sutra, states that by birth, every human being is a Shudra. It is by education and upbringing that one becomes twice born. Thus, in this way, Vedas, the oldest scriptures in Hinduism, declare equality of all human beings at birth.
Thank you all very much for the lovely sonata and the beautiful singing. Very enlivening to get the real thing, and impressively behind a mask. Very impressive indeed. I've been asked to speak about pluralism, minorities, community, and all kinds of things, and the first question I have in front of me from Monty is define Hinduism. Before I came here, I was with a friend, and we had a really good laugh just remembering old times, and we were in stitches. And I thought, no, I have to come here and be serious and boring and a bit dull and define Hinduism. So let's not do that then. Sorry. I was thinking myself, what does community mean to me? So I've been a Hindu for 42 or 43 or 40-something years. Now, I'm the wrong colour, I know, and I don't have the accent. I can do an Indian accent if you like, but it doesn't mean that I'm a Hindu. So I've been a Hindu priest for over 40 years and functioned like that. And I can just say what it means to me in terms of pluralism, etc. And pluralism is actually the thing that got me first about Hinduism. I didn't set out to become a Hindu, and I wear the term very lightly. I actually, at the age of 18, joined an ashram, which is a place of spiritual education for Hindus, in Dublin, of all strange places. In 1979, there weren't a lot of ashrams on the go at that stage, and I joined to become a Christian, not a Hindu. I was serious about Christianity. I was reading the Bible, coming from an Irish Catholic background. That's practically heresy to actually read the Bible. And I was very impressed with what I heard. And I heard Jesus Christ talking about the idea of love of God and love of brother, which was a pluralist idea. It's just I didn't actually see it being practiced anywhere, which is a bit of a problem. And I was trying to figure out who actually practices this. Is this real? Because it's very attractive. I like it. So who practices it? I was visiting convents and monasteries and going to, God forbid, Protestant meetings, which in Ireland at the time was a real no-no. And I ended up in a Hindu temple, this little ashram with 6 members. But they were actually practicing what I was reading in the Bible. So I went away and I thought about it for 3 months. I didn't want to shave my head and wear saffron robes necessarily, and do all the other things, rising at 4 a.m, taking a cold shower. That's great in India, but in Ireland in the winter it's not so appealing. So I went away and thought about it, and I came back and I asked the leader of the temple, I said, could I join to become a Christian? and he thought about it and he said, yes. So the next morning, the first service in the temple is 4:30 in the morning. The next morning at 4:30, I came in after my cold shower, and so on the temple altar was a little picture of Jesus that he had put there for me. And I thought, well, that's pluralism. That's affection. He was trying to help me, even though I wasn't signing up on the dotted line to say, I agree with everything you say, and the whole 9 yards. I'm only interested in this bit, but I'll agree to all this if I have to. He was being very open. So I was very intrigued. I really wanted to learn more about this. How do you talk about the idea of love of God, which this tradition did, and it's older than Christianity? So the Christianity, what kind of Christianity was I talking about here, and how broad can this get? And I found 3 ideas that really influenced me. I'm really going off script here. But 3 ideas that really influenced me. One was, I suppose I can put my glasses back on again because I don't have to read. One was, in Sanskrit it's called Rita, and it's a word that no one ever talks about anymore. But a lot of what we know as Hinduism comes from this concept. It's a very simple, observational thing. Indian philosophers, we don't even know their names, but a long time ago, some thousands of years ago, this appears first in the written form in the Rig Veda, which is the oldest book of philosophy we know about. But they speculated that they've arrived into a world where everything is highly organized. And what is my place in this world was their question. They just look into the sky and see all this traffic going on with the stars, and it's a pretty good traffic system. It's possibly better than London or somewhere, but it's highly organized. An acorn grows an oak tree, not a beech, or an alder. It grows an oak tree. This is quite well organized. So I'm part of a huge system that pre-existed me, and when I leave, it will continue to exist. So I'm a very, very small part of this machine. So what's my part to play? If I'm a cog in a machine, what's the part to play? And if I don't play my part, then I'm detracting. So it's very important for me to find out what's the thing I have to do. But the interesting thing about this that I discerned was this was a very individual journey. This was the basis of Indian pluralism. It's up to every individual to see this for themselves and then to see what they have to do, what their cogness is, if we call it that. So we're all different cogs, and I can't tell you what to do because I don't know you. I don't know your story. I don't know your intention. I don't know your desire, your aspiration, your meaning, your mission on the planet. What is it? You have to tell me. But I have to tell me. I'm the only one that can tell you what my mission is. So that idea of pluralism is there right from the start. And from it comes an idea of service. It's all about others. That I do this so that I can serve the greater whole. So this idea of service becomes very important. Also interdependence, cooperation of any kind, compatibility, harmony, balance. All these ideas are very Indian ideas, not just Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, Sikh as well. And these ideas went through Buddhism mainly into China and Japan, and through Vaishnavism, another Indian tradition, into Burma and Laos and Cambodia and Vietnam, all up to Bali and Fiji. So the biggest Hindu temple in the world is in Cambodia, very ancient temple. So I began to see, well, this is pretty big. I never heard any of this stuff. This, interestingly, is not studied in Western universities, Indian thought, Indian philosophy. It's not considered very seriously. But it does influence most of the population of the planet. So, but essentially pluralism. Then another idea that is a Hindu idea is the idea of Atma, the self. It comes from a very simple philosophical question. Who are you? And it's a very simple question. I can ask you who you are and you'll possibly give me a name, but of course you could change your name, so it hasn't identified you very fully, really. And you could say you're a woman, and you could change that as well. And you could say you're British, and you could change that as well. So who actually are you? And this is a more fundamental question. What is the substantial part of us? And if we can't answer that question, we're actually totally ignorant. And we're ignorant, that's relevant, because we won't know how to be happy. We won't know which part of ourselves to satisfy most. What's the part of us that needs real nourishment? I can nourish my body, and I can keep nourishing it, and if I do, I'll continue to put on weight. And I can nourish my emotions, and I'll eventually get kind of mental. And I can nourish my intellect and just surround myself by books, and I'll eventually get fed up with people because they're boring. Books are more interesting. So which part of us is the part that we should really nourish? And one answer to the question is, I'll ask you all a question. Everyone put your hands up. Everyone who wants to be happy. Please raise your hands. Oh, that's unanimous. There you go. That's pretty pluralist, isn't it? I'll ask you another question. How many of you would like to suffer and die, which we can arrange this evening? No takers for that. It tells me a lot of things. Actually. One thing, the first question tells me you're not actually happy yet. You would like to be happy. It's something that you aspire for. But the other question tells me something maybe more interesting, that you are interested in a happiness that doesn't end. And what's the vocabulary of happiness? Can anyone suggest the vocabulary of happiness? Think of a Hollywood movie or a Bollywood movie. I love you forever. I will never forget you. No one proposes to their love, gets down on one knee and opens up the box and says, I will love you for about 28 and a half years-ish. Scientifically, that could be pretty much spot on, but it's not winning in any way, because it's not the vocabulary of happiness. And vocabulary of happiness is about eternity. And you've told me you have a desire for a happiness that doesn't end with suffering and death. Very unfortunately, it will. One type of happiness at least. So where is the happiness you have just betrayed to me you aspire for? And these are very simple observations in Indian philosophy. So if you can't answer the question, who am I? You don't know how to satisfy your actual self. The self that needs to be happy eternally. So they conclude there is an eternal self. But this eternal self, again, is individual, because everyone is on their individual journey. So it means there are as many philosophies and religions in the world as there are individuals. And again, this is another basis of Indian pluralism, that you have to respect every single individual in their journey, whatever it may be. And as you say, the Charvakas, the atheists, would be part of the philosophical discussion, because that's their journey, that's their truth, that's their way of seeing the world. And how can I learn from that? So and then the final basis is one of bhakti, which is one of the most popular traditions in Hinduism, and it's the tradition that I got involved in myself, and it's the one of love and devotion. So in this idea, there is a God. So you go back to Rita and you think it's a highly organized, and you think, well, who organized it? You start to discuss it from that point of view. And we are spiritual beings. We have an eternal aspiration, so therefore there's part of us that's eternal. How do I feed that? And is this person who's behind all that eternal, and how can I have a relationship with that person? And the basis of that relationship being love, because that's what we're looking for. So where is the repository of love? If there is this spiritual person, how can I make a connection and learn from this person how to love? Because otherwise love is very difficult for us. Love is often a business relationship. I go to your door and knock on it with my chocolates and my flowers, and you open the door, and I expect a return on my investment. That's the deal. And that's not love, that's business. And that's most of our relationships. Because Hollywood and Bollywood tell us so, and all the books we read and all the music we're hearing tells us this is the transactional nature of love. Is there a love that is selfless? Is there a love that with no expectation of return? And that love requires, that selflessness is a very individual journey, obviously. How can you be selfless in a context where other people aren't selfless? So therefore you go to the ultimate repository of selflessness. You go to a spiritual place that's not material, it's not transactional. And that's the other way that we have pluralism, because if I have a contact with this supreme person, this spiritual person, this loving person, and in Indian culture, this isn't conceptual. You do get the names and addresses. You have Krishna and Rama and Shiva, and Krishna is particularly popular, the most popular deity, because Krishna is the god of love. Krishna is a child. How can you not love a child? That's kind of the basis of it. And so God is a child. It's a completely different idea. When English people went to India, it totally freaked them out. It's not in the memo. That's not what God is. And then God is Rama. God is a warrior. God is also Kurma, a tortoise. These are avatars. This isn't a Twitter handle. This is the origin of the word, which is the descent of God on earth. God is not even speciesist. He's spiritual in the sense that he sees spirituality he sees pluralism everywhere, among all the nations and all the colors, nothing to him. As a Kurma, he's one color. As Krishna, he's blue. As Rama, he's green. Whatever. It's not an issue for him. Vishnu comes down as what's her name? Mohini Murti. Mohini Murti is a girl. So gender is not an issue. It is for us. Race is an issue for us. Color is an issue for us. This is the pluralism. But beyond that, he's not speciesist. Wherever he sees life, he sees this little spark, this little person, maybe trapped in a very strange body, but this is a person. So this is also pluralism on a very massive scale. He's not racist, but he's also not speciesist, which for environmental theory is really excellent. Our legal system is based on the idea of human dignity. But this philosophical proposal would say the legal system should be based on the dignity of all life. That's the basis of environmental policy. That's a much more broad-minded approach, a much more pluralist approach, I would suggest. I don't know how I'm doing for time here. I can talk forever because I'm Irish. You would ask some specific questions about minorities, etc. I stand before you as a minority. I'm Irish in England. That's a minority. And believe you me, you get treated like a minority. And I'm an Irish Hindu priest in England. That's a minority. I'm also kind of an Irish Catholic Hindu. That's a minority. We're all minorities if we're really pluralist. Each one of us has a different perspective on life. We may all consider ourselves Anglican or Hindu or Jewish, but we're completely different. All the black people, they don't think the same. Everyone's an individual all the time. And we have these little groups of minorities that group together under a flag of Irishness or gayness or whatever it is we claim to be a minority of. Minorities are normal. It's just how do we treat each other as individuals? That becomes the most important question. And there's a text that has influenced me my whole life since I first heard it over 40 years ago. It's in Sanskrit. It's from a Bengali saint, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and it's from the 15th century. And in Sanskrit it goes, Trinadapi sunichena taroriva sahishnuna manina madanina kirtanaya sada hari. It says, if one wants to worship God, one should do so in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than a straw on the street, more tolerant than a tree. One should be ready to offer all respect unto others and expect none for oneself. in such a state of mind, one can worship the Lord constantly. And I just thought as a kind of a saying for pluralism, to be more tolerant than a tree means a tree, you can chop a tree down, it doesn't say anything, it just stands there, takes it. To be more humble than a blade of grass, everyone just walks on the grass, thoughtlessly. To offer all respect unto others and expect none for oneself. Wow, that's an ask. And how do you have to think about other people? What kind of broad-mindedness and broad-heartedness and love do you have to be able to deal with people like that? And that's the essence of Indian pluralism. It's not really conceptual, it's not social, it's not communal, it's not about minorities, it's about individuals. It's how we as individuals treat other individuals and what our responsibility is, no matter what religion we call ourselves, because there is no such thing as Hinduism. It's a term the English used in the 19th century just for the census. There are a myriad of religions and cultures because Indians think like this. They think in a genuinely pluralist way. So there you go, I think. Yes. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Shaunaka, for your talk, which, as always, helps disentangle complex concepts. And one thing I've learned again is you deal with chaplains in a different way than you deal with scientists. I thought I would provide a structured approach that we would sort of play within, and then we had different chaplains from different beliefs talk about similar issues, allowing students an opportunity to contrast between different ideas. But I had lost one thing, which you have reminded me again, as you do every week on the Tuesday reading groups, which is sometimes in looking at the details, we miss out the big picture. What is it that's really a piece of text, a faith, a belief, or a person trying to communicate? And Shaunaka, again, beautifully highlighted that. So thank you so much for that. Very grateful. Now I'll move on to intentions. Now, our chapel is non-denominational, as is the college that we are part of. The inscriptions outside the chapel make it clear that it's a house of prayer for all people. And we pray in our own unique ways, not just in celebration, but also in loss. Therefore, today, I'd like to invite a member of our choir, Dhruv Sengupta, to say a few words reflecting on the memory of his aunt, who was the author of the very first reading for today's event.
Thank you, Monty, and thank you, Shaunaka ji, for the talk as well. As Monty said, the work you heard me read a short while ago was written by Indian author Subhdra Sengupta, my aunt. On May 3rd, 2021, she unfortunately passed away from COVID-related health complications. Today, I will be telling you all a little about her. Subhdra was an idol. In recent years, she'd been honoured by numerous media and literary institutions, including the Sahitya Academy, India's National Academy of Letters, as well as having one of her works adapted into a television series for national broadcaster Doordarshan. But my aunt, or my Pishi in Bangla, Buldi to her family, and to many of her friends, did not write for awards, nor for articles, nor for any recognition of the sort. When commendation came for her work and contributions to literature, her dimpled smile was outshone by those around her, who were perhaps even happier than herself that she was being recognized. The reason I wanted to speak of her life today, alongside the extracts, is of course primarily in her memory. Why I thought it was especially apt is because I struggle to think of anyone who personified the ideal of being one with the community around oneself more than her. When those around you are truly happier than yourself about your achievements, you know that you have reached said ideal. The reasons Buldy Pishy wrote were the same reasons why I, and all those around her, loved her. I wasn't old enough to understand her level of recognition when I was a child. I adored her, and I continue to adore her because of who she was. And who she was is why she wrote. She was kind. She wrote because she wanted to provide and spread joy, just as she would put out milk and leftovers for the cats of her neighbourhood. Until I was in my teens, she was never Buldy Pishy, let alone Subhdra in my reference, or even Pishy for that matter. Cat Pishy was her moniker. She was a patriot. She wanted to educate children, not for them just to rote learn something meaningless to them about the history of our country, but to love and understand the many exciting and thrilling aspects of it. She wanted the eyes of young people to light up in excitement as they become engrossed in meticulously crafted stories, just as mine lit up when she took me to museums and ancient sites, the historical heart of Delhi. And she wanted them to be shocked with delight as they realized that the scenes she set weren't just some figure of her imagination, but realistic depictions of the past. She was brave and outspoken. As I got older, I realized her passion for history, and especially the Mughal Empire, wasn't a product of her own loves alone. Instead, she was a bastion of support for the study of a formative period of history in our country that many today are attempting to forget. She was never afraid to critique, never afraid to challenge, even as it became more and more difficult in our country. And she was funny. She could make anyone laugh of any age. I owe much of my sense of humour to her. Subhadra's life was cut short in the midst of a horrible pandemic. But even in the time she was given on earth, she gave us an example to follow, one of being a strong, unifying member of our communities. If we can even begin to emulate her actions during our lifetimes, we can be assured that our impact on the world around us will be a positive one. Thank you.
Thank you, Dhruv, for sharing the memory of your aunt. Well, that's our program for today, and we hope that you join us next week for music and readings on angels. But for now, I shall pass on to Luca on the organ.